We're going to get started today with the situation with the prisons, and everybody will be glad to know that our prisons are almost full, and that without prison spaces, police can't arrest dangerous criminals and courts can't hold trials. So in order to solve this problem, the UK government, as everybody will know by now, has released a bunch of dangerous criminals so that the police can arrest them again and the courts can hold more trials. It's excellent stuff. Ultimately, justice would grind to the halt, says the British government. If we don't act, law and order would break down. So they went on to say in their little Twitter graphics fest this morning, this is why we're changing automatic release dates for some prisoners so that they leave after serving 40% of their sentence rather than the current 50%. Freeing up these spaces is the only option to avert a crisis. But it's a crisis of Keir Starmer's own making, because he's decided to throw, aside from the people that were violently rioting, a bunch of other people that were merely commenting on social media or who are journalists and are being accused of various anti-terrorist related criminal offences. It goes on to say it does not apply to all prisoners. There are exemptions to sentences for sex offences, serious violent offences with sentences of 4 years plus, terrorist offences, offences relating to national security, and offences connected to domestic abuse like stalking and non-fatal strangulation. And yet the mainstream press is full of stories over the last day or so about cases of people not receiving warnings that the offender was being released and that they were potentially at risk. So if you are part of the victim contact scheme or the victim notification scheme, your victim liaison officer will inform you of any change to release dates. Why would this be necessary if people related to domestic abuse offences that are not being released? So this doesn't add up. It went on to say this: offenders will still serve their full sentence. Even after release, they'll be on probation under restrictive licence conditions with strict supervision. How is that possible? As we'll see in a minute, the probation service has been under massive stress for a very long time now. If they breach their licence, this says, or it's necessary for public protection, they can be recalled to prison. How can they be recalled to prison when there are no prison spaces and we're making room for the new prisoners by releasing the old prisoners? We're replacing those old prisoners with new prisoners, and so there'll be no prison spaces again. So how does this work? How will they be recalled to prison? This seems like a pack of lies. So they go on to say the probation service has been working over the summer to prepare for prisoners' releases by carrying out safeguarding and domestic abuse checks to protect partners and children, sharing information with police and other key partners, and finding homes and job centre support for those released to support the rehabilitation. Again, at the end, they say if you're a victim of crime, you can find free confidential support at victimandwitnessinformation.org.uk. So this is the Victim and Witness Information website. You'll notice in the top right-hand corner there's a small link that says online safety. I just wanted to highlight the information that they provide for online safety. They say if you need to hide what you're doing on this website or protect yourself from someone, it can be safer not to use your home computer or your mobile phone. Well, it's a bit late to tell people that now whenever they've already been to the website, but okay. And they go on to say when you use this website and every time you use the internet, your device saves a record of the pages you've looked at, and they're pointing out that this could be a risk if you've got a domestic violence situation. And they talk about small files called cookies. And they say, they give advice on how to delete cookies, but they say be careful because deleting cookies will also delete stored passwords for online accounts. This is complete nonsense. And this is such bad advice. If any organization is storing a password inside a cookie, then that would be the last time I would ever visit that organization. That is not what cookies are for. And so that is quite bad advice, because that will potentially prevent people from deleting cookies. But anyway, I just want to highlight this. Speaking of the probation service, this is Napo, the probation union, and this is what they had to say about this. They call it a ticking time bomb. Probation unit Napo fears that the early prisoner release scheme is a ticking time bomb that could put public safety at risk. The scheme, originally initiated by the previous government, will see 1,700 prisoners released early today, that was yesterday, to ease overcrowding in prisons. But Napo and its members fear that this is just moving moving the problem from one place to another without properly assessing the risks to probation staff and the general public. The probation service is currently facing a crisis of its own. Chronic staff shortages, excessive workloads and poor morale have staff worried about how they will be able to supervise this influx of service users, particularly those who should not be eligible for the scheme but are somehow being released because they're serving concurrent sentences involving a lesser offence. So we get to see why some of these risky prisoners are being released. The announcement of the policy had already exponentially increased workloads for probation staff working in prisons and the community as they attempted to accelerate release plans, develop and strengthen risk management plans, and find appropriate accommodation for those being released. With workloads significantly higher, the ability of staff to address risk and support the transition of those being released will have a wider impact on the work that's already being undertaken. And this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, because Napo, as they said in the previous paragraph there, this is a continuation of a policy which the Tories had originally initiated. So again, this is not change on behalf of Keir Starmer, it's just acceleration. So if we look at Napo's comments from May 2024, when the original plan was announced by the Tory government, Napo, the largest trade union representing probation staff, they said, has condemned the government's recent announcement that from the 23rd of May, certain categories of prisoners in 84 premises across the Mail estate in England and Wales will be eligible for earlier release up to 70 days prior to the end of their sentence. A similar scheme that has been running in the female prison estate has now been suspended. So the very much stronger language with the previous government. Perhaps that's because they're a union, I don't know. But anyway, just to highlight what Charles had reported a couple of weeks ago about the reoffending rates. Adults released from custody or starting court orders had a proven reoffending rate of 33.4%. Adults released from custodial sentences of less than 12 months had a proven reoffending rate of 56.1%. And the question is, bearing in mind the stress of the probation service, how much actual coverage is going to be given to these new people released, and what are the chances of reoffending? In the meantime, the mainstream press has been going nuts with the headlines designed to enrage the population. So my stepdad broke my ribs and made me lick dog feces off his shoe when I was 9 years old. Now he's free after serving just 19 months. I mean, if these cases are true, it is shocking, and I mean, Starmer should be answering for this, but of course many of these headlines are inflammatory as we just run through them. But don't worry, because Starmer's uncomfortable with some of the people who have been released apparently. So we'll be back. Thieves and drug addicts admit they'll end up back behind bars. The other point to make here is, of course, part of this is about driving demand for offenders to be sent overseas in order to deal with this problem. This, again, was something that the Tories had attempted to do with the criminal justice system, and the idea of sending prisoners to Estonia apparently still on the cards. So, Charles, I don't know what you think about that very briefly. What are your thoughts?
I think well, first of all, good afternoon all, and good afternoon, Mike. The big question that hardly anybody wants to tackle is what is the expected outcome from a prison sentence? Given the reoffending rates, and indeed the way in which we're seeing people who are substantially below the threshold of criminal activity are actually ending up in prison now. What is the expected outcome? And if that's not dealt with, then all of this is in effect for naught. It's layers and layers of confusion upon one another. And the other thing, I think, is that what we forget is how quickly the prison population has risen from the 90s. Between 1993 and 2012, the prison population doubled. And that's because of effectively procedural ineptitude and an inability to be able to grasp what was going on within the system, and they're still feeling the hangover from that. So it is complete chaos, and unless they start again, it's not going to get any better.
Well, indeed. We'll talk about this much more.